Happy Tuesday evening, everybody. I want to take an opportunity to share with you just a devotional of encouragement today. I want to remind you that God is a promise keeper. God has never made a promise that He has not kept. And if God has made you a promise, then He has every intention and every capability of following through. And because He's a promise keeper, He will keep that promise that He made to you. A lot of times when we face difficulty in life, we get discouraged, but what we need to do in order to be encouraged is to look back to Jesus, look back to the Lord, set our eyes back on God, and then we can very easily know that God's in control, that He hasn't lost control, that He's not surprised by anything that we face, whether that be, some disappointing news we got at the doctor's office, whether that's because we lost our job, or whether that's because we're at odds with a family member, or because some situation that crept up that maybe we caused. Doesn't matter. God's a promise keeper, and we should be encouraged that everything that He promises to us, He will fulfill. And one story from the Bible that's a great example of that comes from Genesis chapter 21. It says this in the first verse: "The Lord visited Sarah as He had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as He had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him." Wow, God is a promise keeper. God loves to keep His promises. And in the story of Sarah and Abraham, remember God had made a promise that they'd have a son. And they got impatient, thinking maybe God, in order to keep His promise, needed a little bit of help from them, men and women. And so what happened? Abraham went and spent some intimate time with a handmaid of Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael was born, and that was not the way that God wanted to fulfill His promise. God said that He would cause that promise to be fulfilled. God had already laid out a plan, and that plan was for Abraham to get a son through his wife, Sarah. That was the promise. And it took longer than maybe they wanted it to, obviously. It looked differently than what they had initially thought. They're thinking, we're getting too old physically to have a child. I mean, what's it going to be like to raise a child in that old age? And, God's made this promise. It all comes back to this. They forgot that God is a promise keeper. They lacked faith. And eventually it caused problems that they tried to help God out a certain way. But in Genesis chapter 21, they're so encouraged because God did what He said He would do. The verse says that God kept His promise. God has made many promises to His people. He's promised that He'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. But God never promised that we wouldn't go through the fire. But time and time again, He showed us that He'll go through the fire with us. And so today I want you to be encouraged. He's made a promise to us concerning salvation by way of faith. He's made a promise to us as far as how He's going to be our provider. And God's not like the politicians. Politicians make promises all the time. And maybe they have good intentions and they have every intention of following through. But the difference is God is all powerful. He doesn't need anybody's permission to follow through. God just follows through at the right time in the right way. And all we have to do is hear His promise, trust His promise, have faith in Him, and eventually we will realize the promise as it comes to fruition. And so today I want you to be encouraged that if you're on God's side, He's a promise keeper. He doesn't make promises that He doesn't intend to keep or that He's not able to keep. Like we sometimes make promises to people and we have no intention or we have no ability to follow through with that. God's not like us. We need to be more like God, fulfill our commitments. So today be encouraged that God is the promise keeper. What He has promised He would do for you, do with you, do through you, He is going to do. So just put your faith in Him and trust Him. God bless you guys. I hope it encourages you this week. If you're facing a difficult situation, remember that God is the promise keeper. You can and should trust in Him. God bless you guys. I'll talk to you guys again soon.